We're going to start with a scene that has lighting and a seamless backdrop already in it. Go ahead and open the file Chapter 12 Product Stage 01.max from the Chapter 12 subdirectory. This scene's environment is pre-lit and pre-textured. Now, we don't have to use this scene to start out. However, the goal is to render a high-quality final rendering of an inventor model. And we can save time by importing the model into a completed environment. That's not to say we won't have to make changes, but it gives us a good starting point. The other reason to start with a predefined scene is because we can set up layers that help isolate the lighting and cameras, as well as the background and scene objects. Open the Layers dialog from the main toolbar. You'll see that there is a background layer, a cameras layer, and a lighting layer. Also notice that those three layers are frozen, which means we cannot select the objects on those layers in the viewport. That's an advantage because we don't have to worry about accidentally selecting lights or moving cameras. There's also a construction layer. This layer is set as the current layer, so anything that's built now will be created on that layer. Close the Layer dialog. Now we can import the inventor assembly. We'll configure the dialog box so that we import the type of geometry the way that we want it. In the 3ds Max application menu, click Import. This will open the Import dialog. Since we've already preset the project directory, the dialog opens into the import directory for the project. Open the Deli Slicer directory. There are both part files and assembly files listed in the directory that make up the Deli Slicer assembly. Working with this assembly has been made a little easier because everything has been moved into one directory. While 3ds Max will resolve links within an assembly file, the directories for all of the parts must be accessible and not differ from the computer that it was created on. Select the Deli Slicer assembly file and click Open. This opens the Autodesk Inventor File Import dialog. Here we can set the appropriate parameters in order to import the correct type of geometry. In the Import As area, we want to choose the Body Objects option. There's a little bit more computer overhead required when you use body objects because they're ACES solid geometry, and the polygons have to be calculated for the surface. That's sometimes a reason why people will bring in a mesh as opposed to the body object. The mesh object is lighter and doesn't require the same amount of computer overhead. In the Assembly Options area, we want to keep the Reference Duplicate Parts option checked. We also want to keep Create Layers by Material checked. When this option is checked, the importer will create a layer for each material in the assembly. The advantage to doing this comes in when you are going to be editing the materials that are applied to objects in the scene. By having each material a separate layer, we can simply grab the material off of one of the objects in the layer. After the material is modified, we can assign the material to all the objects in the selected layer. In the Merge Replace Options area, we want to use the Merge with Current Scene option. This will bring the assembly into the currently open 3ds Max scene. In the Material Options area, we want to keep both options checked. That way, any materials that were applied to the geometry in Inventor will come in already applied to the objects in the scene. The mesh resolution only applies if we're using meshes as the object type. Lastly, we need to set the vertical direction to Z. This will orient the assembly properly to the scene based on the orientation of the assembly in Inventor. Click OK to begin the import process. 3ds Max will take some time to process the assembly. Once the import process is complete, we'll see the Deli Slicer where it was built within Inventor. This concept is very important to understand. We can build multiple assembly files, and if we place them all relative to each other, they will import into 3ds Max where they were created and in the original orientation relative to the import orientation. When the assembly file is imported, all of the objects are selected by default. Let's move and rotate the deli slicer into position. In order to keep from accidentally deselecting the deli slicer, click on the lock in the status bar. This will lock the selection. The lock does not allow me to pick any other objects or deselect the objects that are currently selected. Press E to activate the Select and Rotate tool or select it from the main toolbar. Click the Angle Snap option to make it active. This sets the rotation to known degree increments. In this case, it's 5 degrees. In the top view, click and drag on the Z-axis and rotate the deli slicer 90 degrees. Press W to activate the Select and Move tool, or select it from the main toolbar. In the top viewport, move the deli slicer until it becomes centered in the camera viewport. Now that we have imported and positioned the slicer, we can perform additional editing steps. For example, we can edit the materials, or we can add animation. Go ahead and save the file.